Hello, everyone. I'm Asha Nayaswami, and I'm here again with Keshava, and we're continuing our conversations with Asha Millennials Speak, and we're in round two with our Palo Alto friends. So last week we talked a little bit with Keshava about the effect of virtual reality on the millennial way of thinking and a few other very interesting topics. Today I'm going to ask him a few more questions about the experiences he had when he was studying to be an actor. I had a very, very mild interest in acting when I was mostly in school. But I've kept that interest in theater, and I've been therefore interested in Swami's book, especially Art is a Hidden Message, and how the creative arts really help us learn lessons that we need also for self-realization. So I was going to ask Keshava, just sort of first, let's just begin with, I mean, you were a disciple of Master when you started into acting, or were you just raised around it?
That's a great question. I think I would say I didn't yet know I was a disciple of Master's when the acting bug was sort of creeping into my consciousness. But you asked the perfect question, because really my discipleship to Master and my love of acting kind of matured hand in hand.
How and why?
Well, all I can say is maybe coincidence and the grace of God, because what happened, the reason why I can say that is because when I was in high school, I went to an early college high school, and a voice teacher that I was studying with heard me sing, and she had no idea that I enjoyed theater, and she said, "My brother is directing a production of West Side Story. You ought to go audition."
Uh-huh.
And so I thought, oh yeah, that's cute. I didn't know West Side Story. I didn't know anything. But she sent me an email with the details of the audition. And I got home that evening. I looked at that email, and literally I would have to walk out the door 5 minutes after I read the email to be able to make the audition on time.
Uh-huh.
And I was sitting there and I just felt this tug just saying, just do it, just go try.
Uh-huh.
And I thought to myself, I don't know the play, I don't know the music, I don't even have an audition, but I just felt, why not? And so I had just finished singing Handel's Messiah,
Uh-huh.
and as a tenor, I had sung a few of the tenor solos. So I grabbed my music book of Handel's Messiah, and I jumped in the car and I drove to Auburn, which is an hour away. I showed up at the theater, and I poked my head in. I'm here for auditions. And it was a theater company, a young adult theater company. So everybody else already knew each other. I was the new kid on the block, and they invited me up. I sang a song from Handel's Messiah, and I went home. And 3 days later, the director calls me and offered me the lead part.
Uh, I wonder how the rest of the troupe had probably already assigned the lead part before you came on, too.
I definitely felt a little guilty that I just showed up and scored the big part, and there were all these other people who had probably been vying for it for years. But thankfully, I was able to make a lot of friends out of that group of people. They were very kind and very inclusive. I was immediately part of the group. But what was interesting was, at that time, I was 16. I was experimenting with trying to find my sense of self-value by being socially accepted. And so I was throwing parties, I was engaging in recreational activities.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting was, I would go from school to play rehearsal. I would do those things. And then on the weekend, I'd go party with my friends. And all of this is coming to the conclusion that I started realizing every time I'd go out and I'd drink and I'd party, or I'd do whatever riotous activities we had planned for the weekend, come Monday when I'd go in for play rehearsal, my voice was shot and my energy was depleted. And what actually made me realize I needed to do something about this was, I felt like I was failing my cast members as their leader.
Interesting.
Because I knew that I was the lead, and I just sort of intuitively felt that whatever bar I set, everyone else would match. And so if I kept showing up for rehearsals like a zombie, then everyone else was going to be lax. And I really felt that I was betraying the troupe by coming so ill prepared. And, yeah, and so the production was set to premiere in late January. And on New Year's Eve, in classic fashion, we had this great big old party, and I stayed up all night, and I got like 2 hours of sleep. And I remember so distinctly, I woke up New Year's Day and I felt just terrible. And I knew that there was just this resolution that I had to make a change for my friends. And so, by the grace of God, my resolution was that I was going to stop all of those activities. And I then, because I knew that if I stopped partying and I stopped drinking and I stopped being such a Rahu engaged young man, that I would be able to focus more on the theater. But somehow God planted in my brain simultaneously the resolution that I was going to start meditating every morning and every night.
Just, I mean, like from nowhere it came? Or
Yeah,
it came from the misery of the life, or from the feeling of it came from your actual experience of what your life was like. Is that?
I just felt like I was perpetually underachieving my potential.
Oh, very good.
And that was incredibly painful for me because I knew I was capable of so much more and I wasn't achieving it. And that was eating me alive.
Right.
And I felt like I was betraying myself and betraying the people who I was responsible for. And so, but the thought that I would meditate, I don't know why I came to that conclusion, but I did. And so literally I just rolled up out of bed and I practiced Hong Sa because I'd been taught from growing up at Ananda. I knew how to do it. And I just started practicing and I've never missed a meditation since.
Wow, that's very impressive, Keshava. You were 16 or 17 at that point?
16, yeah, 16.
But it was after that that you left home and went to Los Angeles to study professionally?
Yeah, so then here was the thing. I stopped a particular lifestyle and I started another one, and suddenly my whole life just started opening up. And the next 8 weeks of my life were the most enjoyable 8 weeks I'd ever had. And what I've been reflecting on, and I'm not sure I've really come to the heart of it, but I attributed all of my newfound joy and my newfound abilities of concentration, of being able to apply myself to whatever I set my mind to, I was actually sort of attributing that to the theater.
Ah, I see.
And I started thinking that the joy I was feeling was because I was in this production and I was doing it so well. And I sort of missed the other subtler reality that I was waking up to my divine potential. And I was praying. And I would go into theater and I would ask Master to play the part through me. The best performance I think I gave, I had the distinct feeling that I was out of my body watching God play the part through me. And it was just like, oh, wow, look at him go. But then the thing was, I had enough karma in desiring to be an actor and to be famous and to be recognized, that there was a number of theater critics who were coming through for a theater competition for the whole West Coast. And they saw me. And afterwards, they pulled me aside and they asked me, where did you study? What college did you go to? And I said, I'm still in high school. And, you know, they said with their, you know, their self-importance, well, take it from me, son, you've got a career in this.
You did that very well. Okay.
Well, and I believed them. You know, I felt like I do have a career in this. And that I like I said, I think I misdiagnosed my happiness. And so then suddenly I had it in my heart that I had to do this. And I don't think that was a mistake, because I think it was necessary for me to leave home and go to Los Angeles, because that was actually what got me so grounded in Master's teachings. Because my parents basically said, no way, you're not going to move out of the house when you're 16 and go, you know, leave your high school, not even with a diploma, and go study acting. That's ridiculous. But I sort of weaseled my way into it by, you know, what if I lived at the ashram in Ananda, LA, and they, by a miracle, accepted me into their ranks. And simultaneously, when we went down to check out varying conservatories, we also went on pilgrimage and we went to the different shrines of Master. And I had probably the most profound moment of feeling that Master came to me during that pilgrimage when I was 16. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was his disciple and he was my guru, and that my life was made to serve him. But how I thought I was supposed to serve him was still clouded by my own desire.
But you know, isn't it fascinating how God works through us? In one of the morning broadcasts I've been doing, when I was talking about who's pulling the strings anyway, I was just talking about world events that Master said were orchestrated by the great masters from the Himalayas, putting ideas in people's minds. But the way Swami explained it is they have to work with their own karma. So Master is he's moving you in the direction of the experiences that you need to have. They're going to wake you up, but he has to do it in your own karma. He's not going to give you an ecstatic experience of oneness with all of the universe. And he knows that you have a lot of energy to express in a certain way. So he's going to move you like that. And so we find ourselves somewhere, and we're not quite sure how we got there.
Yeah.
So now you're studying acting, and you're already a disciple, because that was sort of like the precondition before you were allowed to go to acting school.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Grip on you. So how did you reconcile those things? Because acting is such an egoic profession, at least the way many people practice it. Did it work against your spiritual life? Did it work for it? How did you experience it?
Well, I think the best way to describe how I tried to reconcile the two is actually summarized in a conversation I had with Swami. And it was one of the only conversations I had with him. And it was, everyone was invited over to a satsang with Swamiji, just like the ashram core members. And I think just turned 17 at the time. And we went over and he shared with us for a little bit. And then everybody had a chance to ask him a question. And I really wanted to ask him the question, sir, if, I'm an actor and I don't always get to play inspiring roles, how can I be a channel for divine inspiration even when I have to play a terrible role? Because what you're saying is very true. There I was at home, I'd do my kriyas, I'd chant, I'd love God, and then I'd walk to school and I'd be doing a play that was about like Vaishya consciousness people just totally ruining their own lives. And then it's my job to like get into character and like make their problem my own and like get it into my heart. And I was sitting there going, this seems like, I might be fighting myself here. And actually on that note, I had such a hard time being cast for certain parts because basically I think my essential purity would shine through too much. One of my teachers told me, Keshava, you could never play a part like that. He said, you're just too kind.
Yeah, damning you to mediocrity in your profession and praising you for character. That's sort of it's a tough combination.
Yeah, I mean, I could really feel for the man who played Christ and how apparently he like was so caught in that image of his performance that he had to go the other way and tried to play Satan. And it was just awful and I could just feel for him that he's trying to prove like, I'm a good actor, guys. Don't just think of me as Christ. But I accepted my typecasting. As Narayan put it so beautifully, he said, Keshava, you've been exploring all these roles, but now you have to explore the role, who am I?
Yeah.
And I thought, ooh, there is a role I'd like to learn to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at any rate, coming back to Swamiji, because it was a beautiful answer, and it was an even more beautiful experience for me because there we were, I was 17, I was a bit nervous and shy, and there were other people in the room who were much more familiar with Swamiji and had much more commanding presence, shall we say. And so when Swami offered the opportunity to ask questions, other people would start speaking before I even had the courage to take an inhalation. And it went on like this, and he kept saying, are there any more questions? And and someone else would go. And then I kept thinking to myself, am I not going to get to ask this question? And then after like the third or fourth time, he looked straight at me and he said, are there any more questions? And I said, yes, sir. So I asked him, how can I play a role even when it's not of a high vibration? And the answer he gave me was, he said, if you can play a part, let's see here, I have to focus to remember. He said, whenever you play any role, if you can feel the joy of God flowing through you, you'll bless the audience.
Yeah.
And so that became my measuring stick for success in acting, was just asking myself, could I feel the joy of God flowing through me when I performed that part?
Wow.
And well, exactly. So did I? No.
Oh, I see.
And but the thing was, it took me a long time to be honest about that. And so you know, if we were to talk about what did I learn from the acting profession, I learned a lot of things, but self-honesty is one of the most useful things I learned. And it took me a long time. But when my acting teacher at the time was a man of profound insight and integrity, and he would always encourage us after we rehearsed or after we did a performance to pause and do what he called a recall, which was basically just taking a moment to introspect about every moment that transpired and ask ourselves, were we being truthful? Were we connected to our own hearts? And were we connected to the other person's heart? And were we connected to the imaginary circumstances of the play? And if you got all four checks, then that was a perfect performance, irregardless of the manifestation.
Right.
And so his whole process was about refining those things, which was really beautiful. But I was going through his checklists and then adding my own at the end of, and did I feel the joy of God flowing through me? And what I discovered is I could get all four of those other checks, but I almost never got that final one.
Interesting.
And what finally made me realize that was when I had an experience of when I did get that final check mark.
Mm.
And when I did get that final check mark was when I started sharing Master's teachings through Ananda Los Angeles.
Really?
And Narayan and Dharmadevi invited me to be a guest speaker for the Raja Yoga class and to teach on energy. Because I loved energization exercises. And so I came in and I lectured and I felt joy just flowing through me. And that's when I started really realizing, oh, I haven't been feeling divine joy flowing through me during the acting. I felt satisfaction, but not what Swami was talking about.
You know, it's so amazing to me that all concepts have to become experienced before we understand them.
Yeah.
The difference between being able to explain that and say yes, 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 even the four check points that you're, especially the two of them, am I feeling my heart? Am I feeling the heart of the other people around me? I mean, you look like you're heading toward an understanding, but the fact that you could feel the difference between just being in yourself and with others and actually being in yourself as an instrument attuned to God is a whole different level of that.
Yeah.
So how did your teacher help you to get, even with the other points, which, well, okay, wait just a second, because we're in different places. One is, this is why you eventually stopped being an actor, correct?
Yeah. And I'll just share because I have so much admiration and a deep love and respect for that teacher, not only for everything he did for me throughout my period as an actor, but when I started feeling this awakening, he basically held the door open for me and said, you don't need to do this anymore. And so I just feel that it's my duty to express my love and gratitude to him for that, because when I started waking up to this, I was talking to him and I said, you know, I feel like a great joy when I'm sharing the presence of God. And I'm not sure that I feel that in acting. And we had a very serious and open-hearted conversation. And he said, you know, he said, Keshava, I really respect what you're saying. And I think you're 100% correct. And he said, God is asking to flow through you in a more direct way. And it was really sweet because he said, if I were to have chosen any other profession, it would have been to go to seminary.
Really interesting.
Yeah. And he said, but I feel like this is the ministry that God has asked me to do. But he said, he's asking you to serve in a different way. And he said, and he said, I give you my full blessing, even as your acting coach, that this is a higher dharma for you.
Huh. Oh, how very fortunate you were to have someone who wasn't trying to feed his own ego or even his wallet by teaching you.
Yeah.
Really wanted the best that was possible for you.
I think so. I think it was one of the great blessings of my career as an actor to have found him. Yeah, I definitely felt he was like brought to me by Master.
Exactly. Well, it sounds like Master had you in hand the whole way, which
Yeah.
Master always has us in hand, but sometimes you see the hand and sometimes it's more invisible.
Yeah.
What what other lessons? I mean, what you ultimately learned from acting was that the joy of God wasn't there for you, but did you learn about how to be a devotee, how to be a human being? What other lessons came from that experience?
Well, one of the things that we really emphasized, that my teacher really emphasized, and that I grew to appreciate deeply, was the ability to listen. And I think that has translated directly and beautifully to what it means to be a disciple. And I'm not saying that I listen well to other people or to God all the time, but at least I have a greater appreciation for its power.
So how does that, I mean, people think of acting as speaking rather than listening. So what does that mean as an actor? How do you listen as an actor?
Well, it's interesting because, yeah, we often think acting is projecting some preconceived notion of a character or of a persona, but really what my mentor helped me understand was the most authentic and beautiful acting is just when you are dealing authentically and truthfully with another human being.
Hmm.
And that you don't have to so much worry about what comes out of you, but if you focus entirely on what's coming out of the other person, you'll sort of take care of yourself.
Huh.
And I really found it to be true that in acting, the more concerned you are with yourself and your own performance, it's like a black hole of self-awareness in a bad sense. But
Mhm.
the more you focus on the other person, then in that act of selflessness, you can get into a flow, an artistic flow.
Mhm.
And then it really can become like a dance of hearts that we're just moving through these things. And something that we really focused on that I think is essentially true is that all stories, all that you ever act in, are about human relationships. It's about discovering more about ourselves by interacting with others. And so what's going on is never you in a vacuum. It's always what happens sort of in the space between two hearts.
Mhm. That's very interesting. You told me about an exercise where you had to just literally go out onto the street and listen with strangers.
Yeah.
With strangers, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So it was an exercise that he developed to sort of help us learn selfless listening without all of our baggage of self-awareness and things like that. And he was really big into the idea of service, that if you could transform what you were doing into an act of service, that it would become a piece of art greater than yourself,
Mhm.
which was really beautiful. But so he encouraged all of us to go out and hold cardboard handmade signs that said free listening or variations therein.
Free listening.
Free listening. And we would just stand next to a metro station and, just hold it. And we wouldn't like engage anybody. We would just hold an environment of receptivity to allow them to come to us if they felt inspired.
Uh-huh.
And then if people did come, often it was that they would be the skeptic and they'd ask, like, what are you doing? And
Mhm.
we'd say, we're just listening. And
Mhm.
they said, what do you mean? And so on and so forth. But every once in a while, people would come and they would really open their hearts. And then suddenly, just like in true, authentic acting, you were having a sincere human experience with another person on a sidewalk next to a metro station.
Mhm.
And the thing is, when someone else has the courage to open up, it automatically opens your heart because like you want to respect them and you value the courage that they are having to open their hearts to you like that. And so consequently, because they're opening their heart and you're opening your heart, some really beautiful things happened. For whatever reason, my magnetism was such, I never got some of the crazy confessions,
Mhm.
but one of my friends was out holding the sign and like this giant tattooed really hardcore looking biker guy came up and he said, I'm 45. I've been in a biker gang my whole life. I've smuggled drugs and guns and done a lot of bad things. And I just discovered that I think I'm gay and I think I have HIV.
Jeez.
And yeah, my friend holding the sign was like,
Yeah.
wow. And we weren't supposed to give advice. We were just supposed to listen. And not that we couldn't talk back, but we're just like there to support them, just to hold the space for them to be themselves. And that never happened to me. I didn't get things like that. But what did happen to me again, magnetism is the king of the universe, but all the religious people would come to me. And I had a guy sit down and talk with me for 2 hours about how much Jesus Christ loved me. And it was great. It was, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to know how much Jesus loves us.
Yeah, I mean, he was trying to convert me to go to his church, but, you know, for me, it was like, yeah, you can sit here and tell me how much Christ loves humanity all day, because I'm eating this up.
Oh, what an interesting thing. So let me think for a minute. Just like out of that whole period of your life, which was a really, you know, it was in a way you were very fortunate, because oftentimes that period of time from 17 to 22, 23, 24 can be quite disconcerting, but I suppose the acting gave you a really solid basis for it. What would you say were the biggest, I'll use that, the trendy phrase, takeaways from it? I mean, what did you gain the most from making that effort?
Let's see here. That's a great question. What did I gain most from acting from that period? I think actually learning to be authentic to my own heart. We took it maybe a little bit too far in that direction, but the tribe of actors that I was in a group with were really dedicated to the principle of integrity, artistic integrity, but also personal integrity, and just being completely accepting of where we were and vulnerable in that, and being able to share it with other people. And that has really served me, I think, in my spirituality and also in my teaching and in my relationships, that there is a real power that can come in self-honesty and vulnerability. Like, I know for myself, I don't have a resistance to telling Divine Mother that I'm like a mess, or, you know, that I'm desperate for her love. And I think that in part was because of the training I had. Because I witnessed firsthand for myself and in others that if your heart is broken, or if you're suffering, if you have the courage to open your heart and just bear that to those who are either willing to receive it as your friends, or even better, to bear your heart for the divine, there is this tremendous grace that comes down that has the potential for healing and catharsis in you and also in other people. I did a one-man show, personal monologue, that was basically just like trying to bear my heart and my wounds for the benefit of other people. And it was the most transcendent experience I had as a performer. And the reason I can share that is because afterwards, all 40 people who saw it were like almost in tears, and just said like how much they were moved by it, because not that they necessarily saw themselves in my direct circumstances, but they could feel their heart in mine, because it's the human heart.
You know, what acting does for you is it allows you, it gives you vocabulary, and it gives you context to do exactly that when you might not have the courage to do it in your own life at first.
Yeah.
But then in order to be good at doing that, whatever blocks you personally also has to be overcome. So I could see it could either make you not at all integrated as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could make you completely crazy, that the only way, or completely divided up, because the only way you know it. I remember reading about some very well-known actress commenting about it was very hard to live her own life because she didn't know what her lines were.
Yeah.
That she was very good as an actress because the lines were handed to her. But if you learned it, I guess, which is what Swami was saying to you, if you can learn to feel the joy of God behind every role that you play, that allows you to feel the joy of God in the role that you're playing.
Yeah.
Moves you right into it.
Yeah.
The fearlessness to experience. I've often thought that one of the secrets of Swami's greatness was he simply wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
And therefore, whatever came to him, he was equally open to everything. And that's an art worth acquiring.
That absolutely is. Because, yeah. And what was beautiful was, as an actor, we tried to embrace everything that came to us as an opportunity to fuel our understanding of the human condition. So we tried not to shy away from suffering or from pain. And I think, just like you pointed out, if we can learn to direct that slightly differently, that can become self-offering.
Self-offering. Well, very, very interesting, Keshava. Thank you so much for sharing.
Wow. Yeah.
Opening the door to a world that most of us don't really live in, but nonetheless tells us a great deal about the world we do live in. So God bless you, friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asha.
Bye-bye.